Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Dr. George Everly is a marvelous man. I got to tell a few of our friends at dinner last night that George has had an amazing career. His dad was an accountant, and so George figured, he'll become an accountant. And then that didn't really pique his interest, and so he got a master's in organizational communications. And he said, I'm really attracted to this psychology world. So he did what any of us would have done and got his first Ph.D. in behavioral medicine. And then he went and he was on the visiting fellow and on the faculty at this little place called Harvard. It's up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in case you didn't know. He's now on the faculty at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health. His other interests are the same kinds of things that we're all involved in. He's a self-taught musician and has toured or backed up Gladys Knight and the Pips. Don't ever forget the Pips. A fellow by the name of Otis Redding, and my favorite, the Temptations. Oh, by the way, he also became a bodybuilder and was so accomplished at it using the techniques he developed in his day job that he became a consultant to the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team. And in 1 year working with them at one Olympics, improved their increased in average weights lifted, that it changed the weightlifting world because of the techniques he taught the weightlifters there. So he's had, again, no interest. He hardly has anything to do. By the way, he has a friend that he's told me about who's a psychiatrist. And his psychiatrist friend said, some people get interested in a subject and they research it and they learn about it. George gets interested in a subject and he writes a book about it. So he's written 27 of them. And some have been amazing sellers. And I was so proud and pleased about a year and a half ago, coming up on 2 years ago, when George said, Jim, why don't we work on a project together that'll become a book? And I think, what the hell can I contribute to this dialogue? And I agreed to, and we're just about finished with the book. It's in its final round of edits at the publisher, and I can't wait. We won't talk much about it tonight, but I can't wait to tell you about it because I'm so proud of the fact that we got to work together. And I said, I love the sessions we have working as a team when we're on with George. I said, let's record these sessions because I can't absorb it all in real time. I need to go back and listen to them again because I've learned so much about and from George working on this project. So people would call it working. It wasn't working for me. It was learning and being exposed to a wonderful person with a great mind, incredible curiosity, and great intellect. And last night when I told our small group gathered at my house about George, he went on to say about his own journey. And I'd ask you, George, now to share with us what you said about the foundational work we've done with this project that's become a book and how it mimics your journey. George Everly.
Well, thank you, Jim. What a kind introduction. Unfortunately, we're out of time. No, thank you so much. It has been a kind of an interesting journey. So the book that Jim and I worked on together was a book, no hyperbole intended, that no one's ever attempted before. So as you may be aware, the self-help, self-improvement industry, book industry is about a $10 billion annual industry. Why is that? My sense is that deep down inside, maybe not so deep down inside, most of us want to be better. We want to be better than we are now. We want to do better than we do now. And maybe it's totally self-serving and that's okay. Or maybe we want to be better for someone else. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's a grandchild, I don't know. The problem is we shoot from the hip. We don't always have guidance. Sometimes we figure it out, sometimes not so much. So the self-help industry was started with a book called, you ready? You sitting down? Self-help. What a concept. And then it just blossomed from there. So in the roughly 100 years of this industry, there's been some watershed ideas. And there's also been some garbage. Some things probably self-injurious, not intended to be, but problematic. So the idea that we had was, let's literally review 100 years. 100 years of self-help books. And let's separate the good from the bad, the useful from the not so much. And let's do what I would want if I were looking in this market. I would want one book on my desk that said, this is a review of everything. If you were only going to buy one book on a given subject, this is the book you'd want. So what we did is we basically approached it from a Reader's Digest distillation version. We said, we've done the heavy lifting for you. Here's the science. And that's kind of where I came in. So I work at an institution that is a highly rated medical research facility. And when we publish, we definitely try to move the needle, but there's got to be some science behind it. I remember one of my department chairmen, I had a mentee, a young psychiatrist. He was an MD, an MBA, and an MPH, and a very bright kid. And we went in and he had a meeting with the department chair and he said, so what should I be doing? What tenure track research should I be following? And the chair looked at him and just said, I don't really care, as long as it changes the world. And we left, and the kid comes up to me and says, is he kidding? And I said, no, that's what we do here. I took that concept and said, Jim, let's do something that can change the world. And I know that sounds hyperbolic. It's not intended to be. But if you go into a bookstore and you go in, it's a whole self-help section, right? How many, 100 books? How do you know which one to buy? So what we have done is we've taken the ones that we thought have the best science, but also are practical. So I grew up in a little town. Some of you know we've had some wonderful conversations. A little town called Catonsville, Maryland, and it's about 10 miles southwest of Baltimore. I used to call it Leave It to Beaverville. I couldn't imagine a nicer place to grow up. No crime, no violence. Everybody got along, really no class distinction per se. The guy at one end of the block made $6,000 a year. The guy at the other end made $36,000 a year. And this is 1955. That was a lot of money. And you couldn't tell. Everybody just got along. It was a wonderful place. And it was wonderful for me because I didn't know it, but I had a damaged brain. The only thing I knew was there were some things when I went to school I just couldn't literally and figuratively get my head around. And my mother was a wonderful human being. And she was very supportive. And she would say, just keep trying. So I was later diagnosed with something called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, more the ADD. And I was also dyslexic. So when I would read a sentence and it would say, whatever you do, do not press this button, I would read, whatever you do, press this button. So I'd be driving down the street and, don't exit here, I'd exit there. Jim mentioned I had a career in music. Some of you play music, some of you read music, right? Can you imagine a worse torture on earth than a dyslexic trying to read a musical chart? It doesn't have letters, it has these funny things turned upside down and sideways, like, oh my God. So I was on a journey of self-improvement. I was on a journey of self-help. I didn't know it, I didn't call it that. But the most important thing that I got, and I got it from my mother, was don't give up. And don't ever think of yourself as dumb. Don't ever think of yourself as impaired. Don't ever think of yourself as inferior. Because as soon as you do, you've lost the game. So all I knew was we would have parent-teacher meetings, and they'd say, Mr. Everly, Mrs. Everly, this is a wonderful compliment. George is a lot smarter than he seems. So I found a way of compensating for I have a little hole in my brain. I have a way of compensating for that. Whether you have a hole in your brain or not, chances are there's something that you'd like to do better than you do now. And what this book is about and what this journey is about is how do I be better? How do I do better? How do I do a workaround? So I went to a state school. They had to let me in college, and got my first degree. Managed to get into graduate school, but it wasn't easy. When I graduated from Catonsville High School with a 2.8, and I was darn proud of that, by the way. I thought I could go anywhere.
I aspired to 2.8.
There you go. See? See? So I got into business school, and I blew through. This was impressive. You will be impressed with this. I went through a 4-year training program in business. I did it in 5 years. Just blew through. And then I said, well, I want to go to graduate school. So I went to the dean. He knew me. He said, George, what are you doing? I said, you're finally graduating. Congratulations. I said, I'm going to graduate school. He started laughing. I went with my roommate. And my roommate still mentions it. He said, do you believe that? The dean actually burst out laughing. And he said, where are you going? I said, here. That's not happening. Well, they had to change departments, but they let me in. But it was interesting because when I went to that other department, my grades, by the way, my grades didn't change. Well, actually, that's not true. I went from a 2.8 to a 2.85. That was that extra year, that extra bump. But the chairman of the other department said, honestly, minimum admission here is a 3.0, and you're not even close. Finally, he said, you know what, I'm just going to let you in. But I want you to know why. I didn't care. I'm in, right? So I'm expecting some laudatory comment of some kind, pat on the back. He said, I'm letting you in because you showed up today. I said, oh, no. Why are you letting me in? He said, because you showed up today. I said, no, why are you letting me in? Because you showed up today. I said, what else? He said, that's it. He said, I have a sense that if I don't let you in today, you'll just be back. That was actually my first lesson about human resilience.
Sometimes showing up matters.
Absolutely. Single best predictor of success in any given field, other than mathematics and music and physics, is tenacity. Single best predictor of human resilience is connection to another person or people, who you know.
Well, that brings me to a question we have for you, Dr. George, which is, you've heard some of our conversations today, and you know from our interactions over the years that we think that the most important thing for us as a team, for each of us as individuals, and for our community of customers is the whole idea of relationships. And you've reinforced that with so many lessons for me over the last few years that it couldn't be clearer to me. But let me ask you to think about your quick response now and over time. We spent a lot of time talking today about how we're going to double down on our activities around engagement. We think that if we demonstrate to our community, yes, we're commercial, we'll never hide that, but that first we care about our relationships and we care about helping our customers to have more and better relationships. And that if we can evidence that service leadership kind of behavior with our community, if we help them to have more and better relationships, if we offer them opportunities and incentives to do things that might yield more and better relationships, even if it doesn't result in a transaction, even if it's just free, and if that's our constant mantra in every way we behave, in every way we communicate and have touch points with our community, we're making the big bet that that will be fulfilling and rewarding.
The science is clear, Jim. Single best predictor of human resilience is connection to others. Why shouldn't it be for organizations? Especially when markets are going south. How do you keep yourself afloat? My dad was a World War II veteran. Jim mentioned he was in finance, but He was also a gifted musician. He was a professional musician from age 11 to 88. Turned down a big movie contract in Hollywood when he came back from the war. He felt that the entertainment industry just wasn't family suited. One of the messages he taught me, we didn't have a lot of father-son sit-downs. He showed me more by action. And one of the things he taught me was life is a journey. You've heard that. Life is a journey and not a series of destinations. So if I can use visual metaphors for a minute, it seems to me, if we buy into this notion of life being a journey, first of all, it removes the concept of failure. It's impossible to fail. I want you to think about that. Maybe have another cocktail, because then it'll make sense. Life is a journey. There's no such thing as failure. The journey ends when you take your last breath, or if you have faith in something greater, then the journey continues even then. But it never ends. What you do not want to be is one of the roadside stands on the road, on the journey. Does that make sense? Because everybody else is. It's here, buy my flowers, buy my fast food, buy my insurance, buy my whatever. But they're all vendors on the roadside. You don't want to do that. What you want to be, Jim, in my humble opinion, is the person who is walking side by side. See, if I'm walking the journey by myself, I pull over and buy your flowers, and then I get back on the road. And maybe another flower vendor catches my eye down there and I forget about you. Or maybe there's something else, but you're now in my rearview mirror. But you're smart, so you have another stand a little further down the road. If anybody's old enough to remember traveling by car in the South to the famous Stuckey's. Stuckey's was everywhere, right? But it's better than having multiple sites is let's just do this together. Let's just do it together. And every significant date, I'll be there for you, and I will reach out with you. I am building a community, you would say, and I want you to be part of it. What's the greatest desire people have? It's to belong, isn't it? Think about your adolescence. What was the greatest need you had in adolescence? It was to belong. Sometimes you got in with a great group and sometimes not so much. And you knew the group you were getting in that wasn't so good, but you got in because the power to belong was more powerful than the quality of the relationship. That's how powerful belonging is. So one of the little academic side courses I took as I became a neuroscientist, and I studied the brain, and I was just fascinated with it. And I worked in a lab with human subjects, not rats and monkeys and the like. So it was functional neuroscience. And we discovered there's actually a part of the brain that is solely dedicated to seeking out relationships. Well, guess what? So the makers of iPhones and the like, and not just iPhones, but phone, they know there is a part of you that wants to connect. And they've given you this device to do it. And now some would argue that for some it's actually addictive. We won't go down that road, but anyway. But if that's true, if the desire to be part of something greater than yourself is so great, why shouldn't you be on that journey? Why shouldn't you be walking side by side? And when things are good, here's some things for you. Here's fruit, here are cards, and when things are bad, here's something else. And you can be a mechanism. Sometimes people will say, I'd really like to reach out, I don't know how. Send them a card, send them a flower, send them some fruit. Because those of us who are less verbose, those of us that have emotions but have difficulty sharing them, we can now share them through this medium called fruit, gift baskets, cards.
And we should be there to help them to express themselves.
Absolutely.
And now with the tools we have with AI, it's easier than ever. We did, as you might know, at Mother's Day and Father's Day, we did a little plug-in tool with our AI chat GPT capabilities and allowed our community to come. So I put in my wife, on Mother's Day, I put in my wife likes to garden, she likes to bake, and she loves spending time with her grandchildren. And it shot out a terrific limerick, a poem,
Oh, wow.
and I actually looked like I was thoughtful. So that's how deceptive this technology is. But George, I want to go back to two things you touched on in your last two comments. The journey we're on with this project for us is, and this is what I've hung on from the first day you suggested it, was that people don't realize that they have the power within to exercise, to fix, and to change not only how they think about things, but to genuinely change who they are as a person. And I look around this room, and I know I see people who have changed themselves as people in extraordinary ways. You rewired your own brain. If you've changed who you are several times, what hope do we have as individuals that A, we can make those changes, and B, there's no expiration date on that opportunity?
I have a lot of students, whether med students, postgraduate physicians, psychologists, whatever, and they will come to me with these questions. And I basically say, you can be pretty much whoever you want to be. I mean, within the realm of reasonable expectation. My dad also got a basketball scholarship, and he took me out. I don't know whether you happen to notice, but I'm not the tallest guy in the world. So he'd take me out on the basketball court, and not only am I not tall, I have issues with hand-eye coordination. So he took me out on the court, and I remember this vividly at age 10 or something, and I was awful. It was clear I wasn't following in his footsteps. But he just kind of went with it, and he said, okay, so maybe not basketball, maybe something else. But you talk about rewiring the brain, and it's a nice pithy saying, isn't it? But it's actually true. We've known it for centuries, but didn't know the dynamic. So forgive me, I just want to back up just a little bit. And when you do something, anything at all, you have established a new pathway in the brain. Anything new, you have literally altered the structure of the brain.
Study music, learn a language, do a math equation.
Worry. The more you worry, the better you get at it.
Ergo, anxiety disorder.
Oh, why not? We actually did a study that is in its 30th year. We were looking for the most toxic psychological state there was. And we fed in the computer all the standard things you would expect. Predictors, not only psychological and behavioral predictor, outcome variable called dependent variables, but we also took a look at physical health. And we found that the single most toxic psychological process was worry.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
So there was a famous neurophysiologist by the name of Donald Hebb, and he basically argued that every time you do something new, you form new connections. And Marianne Diamond once said that you use it or you lose it. Now, the lose it is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because what if you're prone to worry and panic and anxiety? If you stop fueling those pathways, they go away.
Practicing matters.
It's all about practicing. Think of bike riding as a metaphor for anything you want to do, anything. So I learned, like most of you, at age, 4, 5, 6, whatever it was, and I rode my bike almost religiously until I got a car. So at least 10 years under my belt. You get pretty good at it, right? Right? Well, the brain is strengthening itself. So then, got a card, and bike. Till the pandemic hits. Go out of the house, can't go to the gym. So finally spring comes. My wife has a couple of bikes. And she was big into cross-country biking and whatever. And she said, why don't you go outside and exercise? The hips don't do the running thing anymore, so yeah, I'll ride the bike. I wonder if I can do it. So I got on the bike, and let's just say the first, a little shaky, in 10 minutes, I was riding that bike again. Something I had not done, no hyperbole, in over 50 years. That's the power of the brain. I rekindle those pathways. Pick it. You can do it. Believe in it, and you can be it. And it's not just tree-hugging, warm psychology stuff. It's neurology. And that's the power that we have over our own behaviors. But it helps to have a friend. I mean, life is so much better with a friend, isn't it? I mean, Cicero said, connection, friendship with others, it multiplies happiness and it divides sadness. So true. How many times have you had a bad day and you just want to talk and somebody said, well, I have a solution for that. You don't want the solution, do you?
Just want to exercise the thought.
Yeah. In fact, if they start interrupting, you want to say, shut up, I just want to finish. Right? You just want somebody to have that journey with you, not necessarily fix it. So I think you're on what you're doing is not only kind, it's not only compassionate, it's grounded in pure science. But you have the ability to do something that I think our society needs desperately right now, which is kindness, compassion, and hope.
Talk about the last of those, if you would.
So what is hope? Kind of related to faith. I don't mean faith in the religious or spiritual sense. Faith is the belief in something you cannot understand. And that's what hope is. Hope is the belief that there's something there that you can't see. Do you remember in 5th, 6th, 7th grade filling out an interest inventory? The Cooter Richardson was the most famous. And then you get to back this printout, and it said, your beliefs, your attitudes, your likes are most similar to a librarian. Ergo, you should be a librarian. I remember taking those things.
Oh, by the 5th grade, you should know what you want to be.
Well, clearly. Clearly, right? At least somebody thinks that.
George, you had a friend who we were chatting about faith. And I shared with George that I don't have a strong faith. And the friends I have who do have a strong faith, I find myself saying, life's a lot easier when you have a strong faith. You had a friend who talked about the practical issue of whether or not there's a God. His attitude about the choices he had to make.
Well, a couple of stories come to mind in that sense, but the most fundamental was I'd written something about faith, and he asked about what's faith. And I didn't mean to be snarky at all, but I said, if I have to explain it to you, you won't understand it anyway. But I'd written a book called The Resilient Child. I'm not a child psychologist, but I have enough of an academic pedigree that I feel compelled to express my opinion even on things I don't understand.
By the way, it became a bestseller.
So
And it won the award that year for the best book on child development.
Yeah, it was a shocker. But anyway, you know what it was? It was a book about what I had learned trying to raise 3 children.
As a single parent.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting thing when you have 2 girls and a boy. And we had some interesting dances, shall we say. I would come home exhausted. I put my daughter to bed, youngest daughter to bed, and the oldest was out of the house. And I was exhausted. I don't know how to do laundry. I don't know how to cook, and somehow we made it. But I would write notes to myself. Like, what did you learn today, George? Because this is totally uncharted territory. And by the end, I had a notebook, and I thought, maybe somebody else is going to find themselves in this predicament. Maybe this will be helpful. But the book went out to a friend who was former Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. Smart guy. And he read it, wrote a very nice blurb endorsement for it. But he wrote me back, and he said, there's a term in here I'm having a hard time getting my head around. So what is it? He says, it's unconditional love. If I have to explain it to you, you won't understand it. But I think that idea of unconditional love is something you feel maybe in your heart, but sometimes you have a hard time expressing. You are in the business, not to tell you your business, but from the outside.
Well, please tell us. We're trying to figure that out all day.
From the outside looking in, you're in the business of making connections. You're helping people have hope. You're giving them a medium so that they can reach out in ways that maybe through other social convention they have difficulty.
One of the things we've led on to in the last year and a half, doing a lot of brand work, was we came to the term which we call our end state vision, which I think you'll agree has some psychological foundation, which is giving is the gift. Our point is there's a chemical reaction when we give of ourselves. And when it's a tangible gift, the same. And of course, when you're the recipient of a gift, it's an expression of love, emotion, connection, appreciation, sometimes obligation. But is there a science foundation to the fact that giving is the gift?
Yes. So you've all heard the term stress, right? The guy, an endocrinologist by the name of Hans Selye coined the term, brought it from physics into biology. There is actually a center of the brain for stress. It's called the amygdala, Latin for almond. So it's literally two almond-shaped structures in the midbrain. And it is that part of the brain that controls what Walter Cannon, a Nobel laureate, called the fight or flight response. It's where anxiety, it's where fear, it's where rage. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but there it is. We did a study where people practiced certain psychological interventions, and then we stimulated the amygdala. And we wanted to see before and after that if you did certain things, adopted certain attitudes, thought certain things, would it fire and increase the activity of the amygdala, or would it diminish it? To your point, the act of giving dampens the stress center. And it doesn't take a week. It happens instantly. But there are some others that you might take note of, mental note. We have discovered that there are certain attitudes, viewpoints, self-perspectives, whatever you want to call it, that literally override neurologically, not psychologically, neurologically override the amygdala. So one is giving, the act of giving. You feel good about yourself, and actually something called serotonin increases and a moderate increase in something called dopamine. They are neurotransmitters. But there are some others. One is gratitude. Being thankful for what you have as opposed to being jealous for what you don't have. Jealousy fires the amygdala. Gratitude diminishes it. So you've got giving, you've got gratitude. Here's one for you. This is tough. Forgiveness. The instant you forgive, the activity in the amygdala diminishes dramatically. So you've got giving, you've got gratitude, you've got forgiveness. Acceptance diminishes the arousal in the amygdala. And the last one, come full circle, hope. Hope puts out the fires.
A friend says, I'm not sure if there's a God, but I figure the odds are when I die, I had a rationale for why he...
So he Anglicanized it, but it goes back to 1600s, Blaise Pascal. It's very famous now. It's called Pascal's Wager. So Pascal was a polymath, and his formulations serve as the basis for the computers we use today, but he did it in the 1600s. And with many polymaths, they become philosophers, and then oftentimes religious clerics of one kind or another. So he became a Christian cleric, Somebody came to him one day and he said, I got a question for you. This is a stupid question. I don't even know why I'm asking you, because you got the outfit on. I know what you're all about. But is there a God? And true to form, this genius, rather than saying, what are you asking? That's the dumbest question. Rather than say that, he says, I'll let you answer your own question. I will simply give you the means to answer it. Would that be acceptable? Sure. Okay. Every decision on earth, every decision you will ever make in life can be arranged on a 2x2 matrix. Every single decision. 2 of the boxes or cells will be if you're correct. 2 will be if you're incorrect. Let's just focus on the 2 that are incorrect. So, do you want to be the person who decides to believe in God, but you're wrong? What are the consequences? You die. You expect to meet God. There is no God. You're disappointed, but not really, because you're dead.
Whereas,
So, no harm, no foul, no downside, right? On the other hand, let's be the person who doesn't believe in God and you're wrong. And then you die, and then all of a sudden you wake up again and like, oh, what's going on here? And
there are some long-term consequences there.
And then you go to the pearly gates. Do you want to be the person now that has to explain? So do you want to believe in a God that's not there? Or do you not want to believe in a God that is there and then have to explain it afterwards? So the consequence, and this is his terminology, not mine, but the consequence of not believing in a God that does exist is eternal damnation. That's his phrase. So believe it or not, Pascal's wager can be used on every single decision you make in life. One last story. I wrote a book called Stronger, and I was interested in highly resilient people. And I had a challenge, but I eventually was able to interview a number of Navy SEALs because I thought they would be very resilient people. And I took the manuscript to a publisher and said, this is all about Navy SEALs. And I said, do you know how hard it was to get in with them? He said, nobody wants to read this. Find other people. So I interviewed the person who was standing next to the first bomb that detonated in the Boston Marathon bombing. I interviewed a number of patients who recover from catastrophic illnesses. I interviewed professional athletes who the most stressful day in their life is the first day they're not a professional athlete anymore. And I actually interviewed 2 people that ran for president of the United States. And one of them was Ben Carson. Now, politics aside, Ben Carson, if I'm to be objective, may be the greatest surgeon that has ever walked the earth. The man is beyond belief good.
Wow.
He has done surgeries that no one else has been able to do in the history of humankind. He has attempted surgeries that no one has even attempted. Almost was sanctioned by the American Medical Association for doing a controversial surgery that they say could not be done. He did it and now has saved, by this point in time, probably tens of thousands of lives that would have literally died had he not done this. And I asked him, I said, Ben, how do you decide to make these surgical decisions? And he was most famous, if you know his name other than politics, he was the one that was most successful separating Siamese twins, typically joined at the head. So there was this pair of Siamese twins who were adults. Somehow they made it to adulthood. And they approached him and said, would you do the surgery? And he sat down with them, and this is what he said to me. He said, I explained to them the 2x2 matrix, basically. And no one has ever done this successfully. And they looked at him, he said, and they said, we don't want to live another day like this. We were willing to take the risk. So he did the surgery. And they both died. And I said, that had to be devastating. And he said, Well, what we learned from their death was how to now do the surgery successfully. So we did something that was actually routine in cardiology, cardiovascular surgery, but not done in neurosurgery. We simply moved the technology over, and now we can do these. He said, so yes, they died, but they died so someone else could live. And he said, I use that matrix.
George, you're so clever at vocabulary, and you developed a tool. George has worked, an expert in the area of PTSD, and on grand scales. So whether it was the London bombings during World War II, or Fukushima, and what happened to that population in that area, and that led you to do your work. You developed something that has a clever name but says it all. You developed a psychological first aid kit. If you would, we have leaders here who lead our company in so many different areas. And they have people, and where Bill tells me from time to time there's stress in the finance world. Our people sometimes will experience stress. What should be in our, what should we develop as a toolkit, each of us as managers and leaders, in our psychological first aid kit that would be beneficial to us and our people?
So I'm coming from disasters, 39 countries, 6 continents, everything. I've been pretty much on the ground for every major event that changed history, literally, in the last 50 years.
So I was nervous when he was coming to my house last night.
Yes. You know, no one always want to invite me over to your house. I was fortunate enough to work for the royal family of Kuwait. And I gave my last address to the Kuwaiti parliament when I was leaving, and I said, I'm so grateful for the 10 years I've spent here, because I've learned that you have all the money you need. You have more money than you need. And yet that didn't fix the problem. My last words were, your country will never recover until your people recover. And then I got on the airplane, left a silver bullet behind, and left. If you get that silver bullet reference, I'll tell you
You're
about
dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. Well, you got it.
Yeah.
It's Lone Ranger, but anyway. So then it begs the question, well, what would you do? Well, I was gone. I was off to something called the World Trade Center. But then we said, well, forget therapy. Maybe there's something that we can put together that will help people in disasters. And then we realized with the pandemic that my area was helping healthcare institutions recover, get through the pandemic from a psychological standpoint. So we developed leadership protocols, teaching frontline healthcare managers how to deal with moral injury, death, dying, fear of bringing it home to their own families, et cetera, you know, the sequelae. And as evidence, I'm not the smartest guy around. I tried to talk the Hopkins committee out of putting it into the hospital because I said they have too much to do. But we were going to teach every manager psychological first aid. Because the idea was that people were coming not just with operation technical, tactical questions. They were coming and they were wounded every day. Any of you that are managers know that you not only manage on the tactical, technical level, you must manage on the psychological level. And if you don't know that, you're probably not sitting in this room. Because it was years and years ago that the leadership theorists said, there's always 2 jobs for a manager. You have to manage the operational side, and you have to manage the human side. And of course, Douglas McGregor's famous book, The Human Side of Enterprise. So rather than send people off for a Harvard MBA, we said, can we teach them something in 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is, a little first aid kit. So we implemented it. And we even put it online. That class, it sits on a learning platform called Coursera, is the 13th most viewed course in history online. That's how desperate people were I want to help my family. So now what we do when we teach leadership is we say, we teach them psychological first aid because you have to manage people, not just numbers. It's the people that make your company successful. It's the people that recover in a country war-torn like Kuwait. It's the people that you connect with that will make your company stand out when your competitors are wilting. Not the pun. Wilting on the sidelines. And there's a simple science to it. So he actually wrote a book called The Johns Hopkins Guide to Psychological First Aid. It's very academic, but
I'm glad they overruled you and published it anyway.
I am too. I am too.
But it goes to the point of what we're about these 2 days, George. We said, let's make this about an investment in our people. Let's not review the budgets. Let's not review the business plan. Let's not review the holiday planning and logistics and technology that goes into that. Let's invest in the team of people that make this happen. And I'm so thrilled that team decided on this path, that we had the wonderful fellows here today who helped us through their work, and you got to witness some of that. And I couldn't be happier or prouder that my team got to know you tonight.
Oh, Jim, you're right.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
It's my sister's birthday.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
They have tons of great birthday gifts.
Wow.
Wow.
Whoa.
Happy birthday, baby.
Wow.
Yummy. I got to contain myself.
1-800-Flowers.
Celebrate the people you love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.